Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Motherland, Fort Salem, Episode 2. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. An interesting thing was, obviously, like, the president stops by, which makes sense considering, like, right, what kind of, like, witches serve as, like, a military, that, of course, the president is going to be there kind of overseeing everything. So it's about, I love the whole thing of, like, she called her, like, president, whatever her last name is, Kelly, and she's like, right, because Kelly's trying to present herself to be like, we're friends, right? So the fact of the matter is, I need you to kind of be more on top of this, because you and me, like, the fact is, I need you out there getting results, because I'm supposed to be the intermediary that basically tells people that it's okay, but if you aren't any closer to stopping the spree, because obviously it's like, we need to go about things differently. She's kind of making it seem like maybe we should go the more conventional route, probably get like soldiers, boots on the ground type of situation, rather than just leaving it up to witches. But I think for Kelly, Alder, I had to correct myself because last episode I called her Adler, like Irene Adler. That's not what I was thinking when I was saying that. I just misheard her name. I thought it was Adler and not Alder. Once again, I'm terrible with names. It takes a while for names to kind of sink in, so obviously after just one episode I am going to make mistakes, because also, like, it's Scylla, not Cilia. So another correction I had to make from last episode. But obviously it seems like Sarah's got her own issues, because she doesn't just get to do whatever she wants to. There is a hierarchy of people who kind of give her orders. To be fair, I think it's a situation where it's like she kind of put herself in this situation when she made her deal with, like, the U.S. all those years ago, when it's like, I'll help you fight your wars, the Salem Accords and all that. Like, I'm sure all that was kind of like aspects that, like, I wonder, is there anything in it she would necessarily change? I mean, I think her doing what she did probably put witches in a more favorable position, but I'm still wondering, like, history-wise, did witches still deal with the same level of discrimination, or were they still kind of seen as renowned heroes, or is that more of a nowadays thing? Like, is it a present-day thing where it's like, in the past, it's like, is it kind of like a situation where it's like, oh, witches were seen as, oh, something scary, something to be fearful of, something that's devilish? Obviously, I think this episode showcases it's still there to some extent, but I'm curious, like, how much history was warped, or did history kind of stay the same, even with all this kind of being said and done? Because obviously this was set up, but, like, how much were the witches in the background? Like, maybe it's not until, like, more recent years, maybe more modern day, or maybe, like, over the past 100 years or whatever, that they became more in the forefront. Like, the way witches are kind of renowned nowadays seems like it's been a while that they've been out in the forefront. And I'm just curious, is it a more recent thing? Has it been going on since then? Because this is, I think it's always interesting on an alternate take on history, where it's like witches were demonized and they were kind of celebrated while also being demonized. So I just think that's kind of such an interesting development of, like, the road traveled from, like, Sarah making her deal back then to where things are now, Can we actually get a little bit of a performance later on at that pageant of what it looks like, what that looked like back then, kind of like she was on the verge of being hanged or hung. I always forget, like, because hang is in a weird thing. I think it's like hanged being the past tense of it, but even that's, like, weird, because I think that can be used in a sense of, like, you were hanged. Like, I don't know. Like, hang can be such a weird word when you're talking past, present, and future tense. It's a whole thing. It's one of those English things. Like, it's so weird, because I remember that coming up in, like, my English 3 class in high school. It's such a weird thing. Maybe I'm just being a complete and utter idiot, and it's not as complicated as I think. But I remember that being such an issue, like, getting, like, the proper, like, tense of hang, like, which way you use it. Regardless, I went on a whole tangent. But there's also an interesting thing too, where we got introduced to, like, what's it, the fosterlings? I guess it's just kids that are adopted and kind of raised on the fort. I don't know what that's all about, which I thought was kind of interesting, because it turns out Anacosta was one of those as well. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's like, because Sarah, once again, Sarah seems like the only one that doesn't age. I don't know whether, like, she's a special breed of witch, or, like, what her circumstances are. Are there other witches like her? Maybe because she is so powerful that plays a role. I don't know. But what that's all about, whether it's like these are kids that lost parents to the war and they're kind of all on their own, so they're kind of fostering these kids as they get older, trying to like get them to have a childhood, enjoy life and the peace and stuff like that. I guess it's supposed to be like a constant reminder of what you're fighting for, or like I said, I don't know whether they're supposed to be kids. They didn't really go into what their circumstances are, whether they're kids who lost parents to the war and they're just too young to know it, or what. Or maybe they're just kids that just have no one to turn to and they just happen to take them in, whatever the case may be. Obviously, Alder has taken interest in Abigail, Tally, and Rael after their last episode. Like, after their vocal situation, it's like, yeah, I've actually kind of taken an official interest in this, which Carlson was kind of, like, happy about. Because I think she probably, like, having been, like, probably under like Sarah's wing, it's probably like, okay, I like to impress you, so it's like, right, the unit I'm training, like, you're kind of impressing them. It's got, I think it's also like a sense of pride for her too, like, yeah, there's something special. I can already feel it, I can tell, especially after like the whole Abigail situation last episode, and even Sarah kind of pulling it back, being like, yeah, you should have seen her when I kicked her out of my office. It's almost like, it's kind of a tough love thing. It seemed like she was like, oh, you kind of seem like a dick, but it's like, nah, it's tough love of like, I'm trying to whip her into shape and stuff like that. Like, you know, these are like teenagers after all, but yeah. I'm assuming they have to be like 18 or something. I mean, maybe. I don't think they ever went into specifically how old any of the ladies at the school are and stuff like that. They've kind of avoided talking ages in general. I mean, once again, like, maybe that, because I was even thinking about it, because I think in Sabrina, yeah, witches age differently, because, yeah, right, they've made themselves look kind of like Z and Hilda are like older than what they look, but it's like because witches can have a longer life expectancy, like it's a whole thing with them. So once again, that's why I was wondering, you know, what the circumstances are like in this series as well. What I also thought was kind of an interesting element in this episode is Tally, because she's always been steadfast in her belief of like, right, we're meant to be here. This is the right thing. She believes in it. Then her friend Glory's there as well, but she's kind of reluctant. She's kind of scared. She's like, you didn't even have to come here. Like, she's like, you know, it's like, yeah, home was complicated, but she's like, for Gloria, it's like, it's still better. Like, you know, I enjoyed like the peace of it all and the privacy. It's just like, it just scared her being here. But Tally's just like, nah, it's all okay. Like, we're fighting for such a good cause. Obviously, that gets trumped a little bit when she talks to her mom, thanking her for like the gift. But then it's like her mom being like, yeah, this is a death sentence. And it's just like, we could just have a nice conversation. And she's like, when are you coming home? It's like, what? Like, and she just kind of goes like, I'm and just kind of hangs up on her mom. But it's like, me coming home is me deserting my position. But I guess for her mom, it's like, well, whatever comes will come. Because like, I did talk about it, but in the first episode, she was talking about, there's a lawyer say, like, she talked to a lawyer, it's like, nothing will happen if you turn down the conscription, if you don't take the oath. But it seems like, granted, Scylla, about to do it again, Scylla, her circumstances kind of get revealed where it's like, oh yeah, her parents avoided the draft or something like that. Something like, which we know that's jail time, even in real life. But they make it seem like it's a death sentence in this world. So that's like, I'm wondering would Tally's mom have really been able to, like, a lawyer been able to kind of skirt around that? Like, what does happen to people who avoid the draft? Like, do they die? Do they get put in jail? Or are they kind of like forever brandished like a certain way? It's almost like a scarlet letter thing of like, oh, you didn't draft. You are a stain against what is witches because you didn't do your due diligence, you didn't do your duty, type of thing. I don't know. I am skipping around a little bit, but I thought that was an interesting thing, as I brought up earlier, like, that not everyone's all about this. Like, when it's like, oh my god, there's a spree attack, and Tally's like, no, stay inside. He's like, dude's like, what are you, like, 12? Like, how do you know what's going on? It's like, for one, do not disrespect the kids that can kick your ass because they have powers. Like, that's stupid on your part. But it also showcases, like, because obviously early in the episode, she met a little girl that was like, oh my god. Because it's like, Tally's like, no, you can talk to me, it's fine. Because they're kind of considered celebrities, and it's probably like, oh, but it's like, oh no, you're nice and everything. And that guy treating her like, oh, like, it's because of witches like you. So it's like, for him, it's like, he doesn't distinguish between the spree and the good guys, because it's like, all of you are the reason why terrible stuff happens. Like, you're just as bad as the witches that are, you know, with the spree and everything. So I think that's such a complicated and interesting dynamic. I think we can definitely see, because that's actually what I thought the show was going to be about, like, right, them fighting against the world, trying to come after them and wipe them out. I thought we were kind of dealing in that. which we're dealing with the spree, basically, like I brought up, like kind of a rogue nation of like rogue group of witches, kind of doing their own thing. But also dealing with the fact is that there are going to be people who hate them as well, who don't trust them. So they've also got to earn that angle of things where it's like, not only are we here to protect you, we've also got to make you trust us when you don't. Just considering like all the mass deaths that the spree had been kind of like doing more recently. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting element. Obviously, Rael and Scylla, she's asking her more personal questions, but she's like, yeah, I'm curious, like, how much of that, like, when she, like, reveals stuff later on, how much of that is actually true to her story, and how much of it's just complete and utter BS just to get Rael to, like, sympathize with her a little bit more. And it's probably a situation where it's like, because I was like, you've implanted yourself so deep into this, like, because I thought it was so interesting when that other person was like, oh yeah, like, when Rael's on guard duty for being late for the bell, the third bell or whatever, and she meets that other person, I think it was her name Helen, and I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, oh, so Scylla. So I was like, oh, this disguise of hers runs super deep. I mean, she's the only one we focused on so far, but I'm like, makes you wonder, are there any more like spree members there, or is she the only one? Probably like if you get too many involved, it could turn a little suspicious. It could go a little sideways. So you probably just want one spy amongst your ranks rather than multiple, because that could draw too much attention and things could get complicated. So you just upkeep it for one person. I mean, you had to do a lot of deep diving to like be under like Sarah's and everything. Like, I'm assuming that's something anyone can ultimately do. Like the whole like. Because I was about to say, like, not unless you consider it like a glamour or something. Because obviously there's been plenty of, like, witch or magic-related stuff that's used glamours, like, the Wolf Among Us. Or A Wolf Among Us, I can never remember the title. Right, like how, like, they can look human and not really how they look from their world. So, like, that's what I'm wondering, is that what she's technically burning? Is she burning, like, the spell is an actual glamour and she's, like, physically burning it off of her each time? Which is also interesting to know that you could double layer that. Because I thought that was interesting when it's revealed that, like, the moment she was kind of pushing her to be like, oh yeah, Scylla, just give her a chance to open up when she wants them. Don't worry, like, I'm gonna tell, Acosta that you did such a great job and everything like that. So I was like, okay, like, and the fact that you knew so much about her, I was like, it's you under disguise. But when she burned it and revealed herself as Scylla, I was like, that's interesting because you didn't go to your original face. So it's like, you can layer that. So it's like her real face is under Celia, which is under Helen. I think that was the character's name and not just Helena. But either way, it's like, that's interesting how deep that can go. Like, so you could have like multiple layers of that. But the fact is we've only seen Spree do it makes me think like that's only something they could do. I don't know if that's a specialty or that's something like anyone can do and that they just haven't learned it yet. I don't know. Because we did learn a little bit more about the different units. So there's the blasters. They're the ones who use the weather to do dangerous storms in general. You have your fixers who are the medics. The knowers, who are, I guess, are borderline like seers, but it's like they can see around corners, but they're the ones who are supposed to know what they know. And you have necros, because I was confused. I was like, necros, I'm assuming those are necromancers, but it's like, it seems like their situation's different. That's why it's not full-blown necromancy, but I think it is to a certain extent. It's not like you can fully resurrect the dead, but the way she would talk about it, it was basically you can use the eyes and ears, which makes necros very good for covert operation and information gathering, because you can just like use the dead as a means of like, all right, gathering info, which I thought was kind of fascinating. We also see Scylla doing a different, like showcasing that when there's that dead bird and she basically sprouts a mushroom from it, which I thought was interesting because it's like, yeah, like mushrooms are a special type of plant tied to the underworld. So it's kind of once again showing like even in death, there can be life. It's part of a cycle of just like death and life over and over again. Except for like, she's, Rayo was like, yeah, except for my mom. She's really dead. And it's like, sorry a bit, I know that's a sore subject. But the fact is that for her, she was just trying to say like, it's, death isn't as black and white, that it's complicated, So I thought that was interesting. I wonder, is that, like, as herself, is that what her real thing is? I wonder if I keep doing it, Scylla. I wonder if Scylla her real name, or is that just part of, like, the identity she crafted? Which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. once again, it's also a sad thing because like Raelle like is building this relationship with this person. It's like, no, I'm gonna give you time to open up to me when you do. And she's like, yeah, I've been burnt before, and I was like, is that supposed to be a pun? Because you literally burn your face all the time to like put on these disguises and take them off. I was like, was that supposed to be? Is that supposed to be a subtle joke for the audience? I don't know. It might just be the thing of like, right, I have been hurt in the past and I am trying to protect myself, but it's also sad because like Raelle is going to get so close to someone that isn't real, like, and that's probably going to be a whole conversation. Like, no, like you got to know the real me and I got to know the real you. You just didn't know my name and you didn't know I was part of the spree, but everything else about me is real. But it's also like, yeah, but if you lied about this, who's to say you haven't lied about everything else as well, you know? So... You know, it's actually interesting because something more recently has kind of done that whole thing of like, oh yeah, I'm this person, but I'm also this person, but I'm also this person type of thing. Because I'm always constant disguise. I won't spoil what it is, but it was something recently I've come across. Like, it's a franchise. I watch people play it. I've never played them myself, so I'm not like well invested in the franchise. But it was such an interesting like reveal of like a certain character. I was like, oh, you doing that? That's interesting. So it just kind of like the timing is interesting because that's kind of fresh in my mind. Someone kind of doing that. I mean, I guess if you want to be like super anal about it, like this is Freeform and it's under like the Disney umbrella, and it's like, well, Disney has their scrolls. Who kind of work like that. I mean, if you go by Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you have the LMDs. It's a whole thing. We're not going to go down the Marvel route of just comparison, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. I'm also curious about when Raelle offered to fix, Abigail's throat. I thought that was kind of interesting because at first it was like, Anna Costa was kind of showing her that there's a price to pay. Like, you know, your slacking or your issues aren't just going to affect you. Once again, it affects your unit. So now Abigail has to suffer for your mistakes, and because she made her kind of keep up that particular tone. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And so later on, she's coughing up blood. It's like, this should be your blood. And Raelle, feeling guilty, decides to fix it. But like partway through the incantation, like Abigail stops. So that's why I was like, is that not a normal incantation for fixers or something like that? Because that's why I'm wondering, like, is it like a very adverse version of it that like her mom taught her? Like the whole thing, once again, taking like the issue upon yourself. Because she didn't finish it, Abigail still had a messed up throat, but also it's because she took part of it away, not all of it. Abigail's not fully recovered, and now also in the process, Raelle kind of ended up, messing up her own throat in the process. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. But that's what I was like, why'd she make her stop it? Like I said, it must not have been a typical, or maybe it's just a thing of she doesn't trust her, not knowing like her history with like the medic side of things. So maybe that's why she was kind of suspicious. Like, no, I don't want you to make things worse or whatever. But another interesting element, just like showcasing you just like more and more how they can use their voice. I was trying to think while I was watching. I was like, there's something. I think banshees, maybe mermaids, maybe sirens, but more specifically banshees. Seem like they're kind of in that vein of like using their voice as a weapon, which I think is so fascinating. Because what immediately comes to my mind is like Lydia from Teen Wolf is what, because obviously she learned how to like use her voice, like actually like channel her voice and more attacking means and stuff like that, like through her hands and everything like that in later parts of the series. So, but the fact is, like, obviously different registers of like your vocal range and stuff like that, like hitting a point where it's inaudible to like normal human ears, because obviously they're learning the wind shear is basically like a protective layer shield, but it's like you do it in such a way that like no one realizes what's going on. It's such a subtle thing, and I'm like, it's so interesting, like once again why your voice is so important, because it tied to all your magic. And that's just so fascinating, like, because I don't think I've ever really known, like, yeah, incantations and stuff like that, sure, but it's like, to use your voice in such a way is so fascinating, because I've never seen anything do witches like this. That's what makes it so interesting. But obviously later on they're doing their thing too, but because they're all distracted, Tally's dealing with like, right, my mom like making me question me being here. Abigail's like, yeah, my mom, you think my mom's supportive? She's actually a constant like state of pressure, because I always have to live up to her standards. And then like Rayo being like, well, how about you both shut up and focus, because I don't have a mom, so let's drop that subject. And, you know, obviously little by little they kept denting the wall a little because neither one of them is in peak condition, and they've also got so much on their mind. But then finally they blast a giant hole through it, because like everyone got like certain penetrated it a certain depth, but they're the only ones that blew a hole in it, which my nutty brain immediately think of like, a little spoilerish, but it's like been years by now. So it's like when Naruto and Sasuke like Sharingan versus Chidori, and like Kakashi like threw them towards the water towers, and it seems like Naruto's is like nothing, and Sasuke's like, oh yeah, I crushed it. Then they look behind the water tower, and it's like from the front it looks like nothing. You just see the spiral impact, but the back of the water tower is blown out. You know, so it kind of reminded me of that a little bit. But also showing, like, yeah, they do have something special. Like, granted, they were probably channeling their anger and frustration in that moment, but them as a unit, like, how powerful they can be. But it's also interesting, too, that later on, Abigail and Rael do kind of hit it off a little bit, like them sharing pizza and kind of get along. Because obviously it's like she followed Rael earlier when she was following Scylla. And then obviously she kind of returned it later on by following her too. So there was another element too when it came to Abigail we learned about in this episode too, and that was like, was it Lydia? The girl she has a major issue with, and she talks about like they're back and forth. At first I was wondering like, oh, is this gonna be like that like thing where it's like you like they like kind of a girl thing of like, yeah, you shit talking, it's just like, yeah. And then it's like, you my bitch type of thing. Like, I was wondering if it was going to be that type of thing. And it's like, oh no, you two just straight up hate each other's guts. Like, you know, because like some people have that dynamic where they talk mad shit to each other. And it's like, we cool, we great. Kind of like, oh god, I'm blanking. From Resident Alien. Darcy has a relationship with one of her friends. Like, they say like horrible shit to each other, but it's like, oh, we're good, we great type of thing. Which I thought that's what I was kind of wondering if it was going to be. But it's like, nah, we straight up hate each other. And it was interesting because like for it was basically like for Abigail it was like a particular date, and it's like this whole thing. It's like she's like, it's like a date, but it's more like an astrological thing, and it's kind of foretold. And she danced with him in front of me. It's like, it's not even about the guy. It's about that was supposed to be my night, I guess, to kind of shine. Which is like, yeah, I think it's not the same thing, but I'm sure it'd be like, oh, the first dance is, you know, usually the people getting married, and if someone came up and just snatched your groom, well, your significant other, your husband and or wife from you, and then like started dancing with them, I think it'd be kind of like a similar vein. But this seems like it's more in a mystical thing of like, this was supposed to happen, like everything was set up for this to be, and it's also probably, it made her look probably bad in front of like other people and her mom, so I'm sure she probably like dealt with the ramifications of that in her own right, so that's why she has such beef with her. They were in the same room at the end of the episode, so maybe like some of that's not there, maybe not. What's also interesting too, being in the war room essentially, as like, you know, like it's like, all right, there's this situation going down. Let's like the way they kind of like you freeze the monitor a little bit, like what's supposed to be the screen, and then the lady touched it, and it's like, I guess you're seeing through somebody's eyes, because at one point someone kind of turns to a mirror, and you got to see the reflection, so you're seeing through someone's eyes. Which I thought, oh, because it's like military wise, like where you're tapping into someone's like goggles or whatever, or when you're able to see like what like the camera that's attached to them. So it's interesting to see that it's more like the spell taps into that person's retinas or something like that, which I think is kind of fascinating. But sadly, the spree were waiting. It's interesting too because they've expanded beyond balloons, because they talked Sarah talked about it with the president in the episode, like that they'd use a bottle, and she was like, a plastic bottle? It's like, yeah, and it could even be something as small as a pill bottle. It's just, as long as it's something that can capture air, you can use that as a weapon. And sadly, that lady's daughter, as well as that entire unit, walked into a trap, and I think basically when it popped, it basically turned the others crazy, and they basically killed each other. Whereas some of the times it's been like, I guess the curse, depending on what the curse is meant to do, sometimes it's just, straight up kill themselves, and others are just had them like rip each other apart type of thing. So And obviously, you know, Sarah's like, yeah, we all lost a door. She's like, no, but in my case, I literally lost one. She's like, right, that's not what I mean. So it's like, so what are we going to do? It's like, well, we're going to take their voices from, we're going to hobble them, and then we're going to bring them to justice. It's like, you know, but it's like, no, maybe what we've done so far isn't enough. Maybe we need to go more extreme tactics. What that necessarily, because I think, like, their means of doing things, the Spree do, like, the very, like, outer fringes of what's good. Like, I think the equivalency would be like, yeah, they're in some super level dark magic stuff what they're doing, but like Sarah won't let anyone under her do that. I mean, I'm wondering, is the rest of the world kind of under those same rules and regular? I mean, it might be a thing of they're kind of like forbidden from going down that route because of like the Salem Accords and stuff like that. Who knows? But maybe it's just a personal choice by Sarah, or maybe it is like a thing of like, nah, we're like contracted not to go that far. But so I don't know whether that's what that mother was referencing or not, but yeah. Obviously, you have all the ladies in the room kind of like getting, in particular, Tally getting drunk, be like, you guys are my witches. You're my witches. She's like, yeah, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm glad to have each and every one of you as a sister. And it's like, yeah, seeing her kind of get drunk like that. Apparently, from what she was talking about, it seems like Abigail kind of covered for her when it came to that whole situation at the pizza place. So that was kind of fascinating. And then there's also the ending where it's like, you know, Scylla's like, yeah, I'm ready to kind of get out of this. And obviously whoever it is she's talking to is kind of talking to her like through a balloon, which when you see balloons floating like that, you can't help but think Pennywise. Like, that's forever going to be tarnished in my mind. Granted, maybe that's why they picked a blue balloon so you wouldn't associate it. Because it's actually interesting because, like, I think the first time I ever saw the It movie was actually on ABC Family, I believe. Or it might even have been before this was ABC Family. Because obviously this channel that is now Freeform has gone through many name changes over the years. But yeah, like this channel, like I said, it might have been ABC Family. It might have been something like before it was ABC Family. I don't remember what it was before then. Fox something, right? If I'm not mistaken. Regardless, I saw the It movie here, so I thought that's just kind of interesting. I saw it when I was like a kid. So, but it's still that thing of like, right, you're always going to associate floating balloons with Pennywise, so maybe that's why they made it blue instead of red, because his typically are the ones they always kind of associate with him are kind of, you know, red. But regardless, tangents and all that aside, because she's basically like, yeah, like get us out of here as soon as possible, which I'm assuming, like, I don't think it was referencing like, oh, me and someone else that's here. It's me and Raelle, because they want her. Like, I wonder why her, like, maybe it has something to do with her mom. Like, maybe her mom was kind of special, and they think Raelle is special as well. And, like, because she's, like, it seems like she might be the special part of that trinity between her, Abigail, and Tally. So it's like, maybe that's why they've taken such an interest in her. Like, maybe she's kind of like, weird reference to make, but it's kind of in the family just because it's on this is on Freeform. Once again, it's under the Disney umbrella. Maybe she's kind of like a Scarlet Witch type of situation, like, you know, once again, whether that's like a title thing or whether it's like there's only one ever born and Wanda is the Scarlet Witch, or whether it's just like a title like every, you know, 1,000 witches can become the Scarlet. You know, it seems like it's just a one-off thing. Like, only one person can be the Scarlet. So I'm wondering if it's something similar in that vein of like Raelle is something really, really special. But nevertheless, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Like, she was saying, "Yeah, get me out of here, kind of. I'm getting impatient." And it's like, "Oh, come closer to the mirror," and it broke the mirror because it was kind of being like a kid. Don't get it twisted. You don't get to dictate stuff. Don't tell us when you're impatient. You do what we say you do, or we could easily just get rid of you and replace you if need be, you know, so don't forget your place, you know, so just kind of an interesting little thing. But, yeah, I'm interested to see, you know, ultimately where all this takes us as we continue going forward. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.